Hello, and welcome to the CTO Perspectives, where we discuss unique perspectives about the most current issues in IT operations. And here today to speak with us is once again Elik Eizenberg, Chief Technology Officer and co-founder at BigPanda. Hi, Elik.
Hi, Yoram. Great to be here again.
Always great talking to you. I really enjoy conversations. Today we'll be talking about a topic that actually a bit surprised me when we first discussed it, and that is the reality behind the so-called promised land of tool rationalization. It's top of mind for CIOs, CFOs, COOs everywhere because it supposedly allows you to reduce costs and streamline your IT operations. But it turns out from experience, the reality is there is no end state of tool rationalization. There is no promised land that you reach. It's an ongoing process, somewhat never ending, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Some problems in IT are meant to be solved, some problems are meant to be managed. This, for good and for bad, is one of those problems that you just have to manage. It's not a problem you can really solve.
And yeah, and when we talked about it, you sort of mentioned that you can easily see it's not only in IT operations, it's in everywhere, right? If we're talking about collaboration, there's always the issue, do I use everything that's Microsoft or do I use specialized tools, right?
Yeah, spot on. If I'm a big enterprise, I can say, hey, I'm going to be a Microsoft shop and can use Microsoft for all things collaboration, right? I can use it for emails, I can use it for Office, for file storage, I can use it for ticketing, I can use it for so many purposes. But then when you talk to every single enterprise out there, even ones that have selected Microsoft as their vendor of choice, you see a lot of Jira and you see a lot of Trello and you see a lot of Slack and Zoom and other vendors around collaboration. All of that just to prove the point that even if you make this directional choice to standardize on top of one vendor, it's not really something that's that easy to convert into reality.
And it's the same thing in IT operations, right? We see the same thing across the board.
Yeah, spot on. In IT operations, you can say, hey, traditionally, right, people said, let's be an HP shop, let's be a CA shop, let's be an IBM shop. But fast forward to today, show me one company that really uses just one of these vendors for their entire IT operations stack. Obviously, that's not a reality at all.
And why is that? I mean, it's always on the marketing messaging, like one pane of glass, single pane of glass, one vendor, and everything. And obviously, the reasons for doing that are there. But why is the reality different? Why are there these conflicting forces that actually create sort of like a seesaw between the two states of consolidation versus specialization?
Yeah, I think rationalization versus specialization or versus fragmentation is kind of a situation where you have two opposing forces. Both of them exist for very good reasons. Like none of them is actually right and the other one being wrong. On the one hand, if you want to consolidate, you're probably what's driving you is willingness to reduce costs, right? A certain drive to create more consistency in your processes and your data sets. If you're fragmenting and creating more specialization, there are normally three different aspects to that. Number one, it's around developer autonomy, right? One of the main things we learned in the last decade is that if you want to drive better velocity in development, if you want to drive better innovation, developer autonomy is probably the foundation for all of that. You want to give developers the ability to make their own choices. And one maybe perhaps an unfortunate side effect of that autonomy is that developers choose their own tools and that creates more fragmentation. So that was number one.
So just on that point, so management might want to say for ease of like for cost sake or for ease of use or for standardization, let's try to do all these tools. But the people in the field doing the actual work say, hey, things are moving. There's these new tools. I really want to do this because I can be more innovative. I can move faster. And so they sort of influence the organization to purchase that tool as well or to work that way as well.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm a development team building an application in Java and I'm another application team building an application in, say, Node.js, I might find that a different monitoring tool would serve me best in each one of those environments. So if I allow my developers to have more autonomy, I have to face the flip side of the coin is the fact that they're going to have two different monitoring tools. Each one is better adapted solving the respective problem. So that was number one. So number two is M&A, right? Like if you look at the trend line over the last 30, 40 years, you'll see that the M&A activity, the number of deals happening around M&A is just accelerating. And the last decade has just seen an explosion in the number of M&A deals. And what happens to a bigger enterprise that acquires a new company is that essentially they inherit the entire tool stack of that company. Now, to consolidate all the tools of that acquired company, that can take you easily 5 years, even if you're very much focused on that. So more M&A focus, more M&A activity essentially means more fragmentation for most enterprises. That is number two. Number three is actually overly, I would say, generally a good thing, right? What companies are doing are migrating to new tech stacks. They're migrating to the cloud. They're adopting container technology, Kubernetes. They are adapting serverless infrastructure. And who knows what will come next. And when you adopt new technology, it often takes a long time for the traditional vendors to adapt to these new technologies. So you might have a vendor of choice that is your standard tool for monitoring for your traditional stack, but then it might take them 5 years for that vendor to catch up with container technology. What do you do during that gap time? During that 5 years, you have to now buy a new tool that is specialized in container monitoring. So that is one more aspect. This is essentially the third aspect that is driving companies towards more fragmentation and specialization.
So if I look at the commonality of the three things that you said are driving specialization or fragmentation, depending on which side of the coin you're looking at it, it's actually a good thing. It's innovation. If you want to move fast, if you want to adopt new technology, if you want to acquire companies and merge them into your existing offering, you eventually will have to use new specialized tools that are not part of your monolith stack.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. I think what happens often is that when companies are more focused around cost reduction and introducing efficiency, that's where consolidation and rationalization becomes top of mind. But then in times where it's actually more focused on innovation, on introducing new business lines and new applications, that's when companies are more focused on actually fragmentation and more specialization. And that's one of the reasons why we see that seesaw that you described earlier.
So it sounds a bit tiring. No, you're going into, I think you're going into a process that you think will eventually end. Then suddenly you realize this is a never-ending process, a never-ending seesaw. So what do? Do you just give up trying?
No, certainly not. I think a company that doesn't attempt to do rationalization is a company or an IT organization that is essentially attempting suicide. I think in the end, over fragmentation, over specialization can kill any IT organization. You have to rationalize, but you also have to realize that you will never reach that promised land. And I like to give the metaphor of taking care of ourselves, right? Like if you eat healthy, that doesn't guarantee that you will be healthy forever and live forever. But if you don't eat healthy, that you're going to pay for it very quickly, right? So likewise, I think with IT operations, you have to think about consolidation, rationalization, but you also have to realize it's an ongoing thing in IT, right?
Right. So it's sort of like a one-off diet versus living healthy. It's not a diet, you're living healthy.
Exactly. And unfortunately, I think some IT ops leaders, they kind of have this idea that they can, in a very focused fashion, replace their entire tool stack A to Z with one vendor, and the day after will be amazing. But that day after never arrives. You have to take a very disciplined, long-term view around rationalization and consolidation. You have to enable the forces we discussed around specialization and developer autonomy and M&A and all that. At the same time, thrive to be more consolidated and rationalized in your stack.
So what's the recipe for healthy living? How do you keep that? How do you keep that ongoing process and manage it? As you seesaw between the two.
Yeah, one, embrace this state. Like, don't seek to be at that promised land. Like, embrace this in transition state. There's no other way. It's just the fact of life in IT operations. That is number one. Number two, put in place some abstraction layer on top of. You have so many tools, right? And as we just discussed, this is going to be a long-term state. So you have to put in place some abstraction layer on top of that would take all of the data from the different tools, consolidate them into one place, correlate them together, and serve as this single point of action, single point of engagement on top of that. And then once you have that abstraction layer, you have more control around which way you lean, right? You can go more towards specialization sometimes and more towards rationalization, consolidation other times.
And I'm assuming that's sort of the philosophy, or one of the philosophies behind BigPanda's event correlation automation platform.
Yeah, that's the premise of Big Panda, essentially um, embracing this best of breed world where you have so many different tools, putting in place that abstraction layer, and powering that using AI technology, so it's not hard to maintain, and so it can work with all the different heterogeneous data sources in one place. And once you have a tool like Big Panda, what we see many of our customers, it actually makes it much easier to decide which way you lean, right? It makes them easier to rationalize, makes it easier to specialize, because now you have that one layer that enables all of that.
And do customers actually talk to Big Panda about this? Did they say? Are they aware of this? That this is what it allows them to do?
Yeah, for sure. I think the main reason people would acquire Big Panda is because they have a lot of data coming from many different tools, and they want that data to be enriched and correlated. But once you put that in place, you start asking yourself, what is the kind of high level problem this is solving for me? And one of the main high level problems is that of tool fragmentation.
Cool. I think this would be a great place to stop. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you so much, Yoram. This was great.
And if you want to hear more CTO perspectives or learn about the Big Panda platform, please visit us at bigpanda.io. See you next time.